What's up everyone? Welcome back to a brand new video. During the last part, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't really need to recap it. Clearly the last part was us talking about how Android 21 would be canon in this scenario. If you haven't already, I recommend you watch that part, just because a lot of the backstory and how she's introduced will be very important going forward. Especially in today's video, we'll be continuing right from where we left off. Not only covering what happens immediately after the last part, but also going into a brief time skip into Dragon Ball Super. For this video, we'll set a like goal of 4,000 likes. Once we hit that, I'll continue with another part to this series. Anyways, let's pick up from here. After that battle, 17's already a bit ticked off, but thankfully his island is relatively okay. Most of the fighting took place over water, and he did a good job trying to get her far away from it. 21 tries to profusely apologize, but he can't really blame her. It is Jiro's fault after all, and he kinda was the same way before. She's similar to him anyways, it would be hypocritical if he got mad. And thankfully everyone else here helped too. No one's really too sure what to do now. But surprisingly, Goten actually gives a very good suggestion. Well, if she's just like Majin Buu, why don't they make her good like Majin Buu? I mean, it worked for that guy, however they did that. Okay, obviously Goten's not too sure on the specifics, but what he said is actually pretty important. Wait, Buu's good now? She actually didn't even really know about that. Because if what Goten said is true, that actually opens up some potential for her. Right now, her losing control of her power is really a big issue. And most of it is due to Buu's power within her. Some of her DNA is comprised of Buu's. And obviously a little bit of good Buu's in there, but when the DNA was finished being collected, this was about the time when Super Buu was made. So there's definitely a lot of evilness within there. But if Buu is still alive and is purely good now, that gets her thinking. Maybe there's a way to fix this. Think of it, if they remove the Buu parts of her DNA and replace it with what good Buu has, that might allow her to keep her power, but not lose control as often as she does. She gives an entire explanation about this, and no one really gets what she's saying. I mean, she's speaking to 17, Goku, Vegeta, and Goten. Gohan at least kinda understands where she's coming from though, but even he is a bit confused by what she's trying to say. She goes into a whole scientific spiel and no one really gets what's going on. But it sounds like it might be a solution at least. Vegeta says they have no idea what to do with that. Instead, she could probably just consult Bulma. Oh yeah, that is true. Maybe Bulma could help. It wouldn't be the first time she tried to fix a Red Ribbon android. Although, 21 realized that this could be very dangerous, and maybe even kill her. This isn't something she could do on her own. And even with Bulma's help, there still is a lot of risk there. So eventually she meets Bulma, and Bulma's pretty surprised to see that there's another android. And this one seems really advanced. Like, Android 17 and 18 were already pretty advanced, and obviously Cell was too. But it's almost like 21 takes elements from both of them. She has all the best parts of the cyborgs and of the bio-android. Besides the fact that there's a risk of her going berserk and blowing everything up around her, Bulma actually gets along pretty well with 21 when she first meets her. And this experiment sounds like it could be pretty good. And there really is no other way around this. The plan is to remove all data collected on Buu, including any DNA. Obviously, I know this isn't how DNA works, but this is Dragon Ball. There's really weird circumstances in terms of how it functions. I know, it's strange, but it'll make sense later on. Some of 21's DNA and data is comprised of Frieza's, but that's fine because it's outweighed by so many others. The rest of her DNA is mostly from good fighters. People like Piccolo, the Saiyans, and the humans. There's not even any of Cell in there because collecting data from Cell would be redundant for her. They just need to get rid of Buu's DNA and replace it with the good Buu. She might become a little bit weaker, assuming that this even works, but it's worth the trade-off. And even though there is a lot of risk going along with this, and she could probably even die from trying to do this, they want to go through with the experiment. But first, they actually need to consult Buu. So, they go to Mr. Satan. He's completely confused by all of this, but yeah, he's willing to help. He goes to Buu and checks. Oh yeah, Buu doesn't even mind. He rips off a blob of himself and grows it right back, handing the chunk of his flesh to Bulma. Gross, but okay, they got what they needed. So now with this, they could actually work on fixing 21. It takes a lot of time and effort, but eventually the experiment is complete. And surprisingly, 21 actually seems okay. Bulma says it was almost completely successful. Almost. Well, it was pretty impossible to remove all of Buu's evil DNA, and there still is the risk of her transforming and losing control. But thankfully, most of that has been replaced with good Buu's data and DNA. And it was pretty weird for her to work with that because he is an artificial being made with magical powers, so his DNA has some weird magical and regenerative properties. But this could actually be pretty helpful. I mean, maybe it'll just repair her DNA on its own, and good Buu's influence will eventually take over. Hopefully not completely. Bulma explains it as all of Buu's old data and DNA being some sort of poison to her, while hopefully what they gathered from good Buu can actually be some sort of anti-venom. In the simplest terms possible. Obviously that's not what it is, but everyone gets the gist of it. And now, 21 actually does have control over her power. She is a little bit weaker than before, but now she could fight without worrying about any evil impulses taking control, or without any of Jiro's programming influencing her. But there is still that little bit of risk that she could go berserk. Think of any other fighter and how outbursts of rage can affect them. Gohan, Vegeta, even Goku. Of course, it's very different for everyone else, and it's gonna affect different fighters in different ways. But who knows, if she encounters any great stresses in the future, it could unearth evil powers that she had before, and maybe even something much worse. But she's going to try and keep that in check. She is going to be training after all. This actually surprises everyone. She has a lot of motivation to fight. Of course, she does have a desire to grow stronger, but this is also mainly for research. She ends up training with a lot of the other fighters, as well as even studying them as they fight. Saiyans really do interest her, especially the ones that she fought. They were pretty strong after all. And she is comprised partially from them. The more she studies them, the more she could probably help them and herself grow. And there's an interesting side effect to this. By this point, Gohan's definitely going to want to dedicate more time to his studies and his family life. He really still does want to become a scholar, but 21 proposes an idea for him. Well, if he's going to be a scholar, he could pretty much research whatever he wants. She'd even help him. Why not research Ki and how it affects humans? They can create some breakthrough discoveries by studying this. This actually does happen in Dragon Ball Online, where Gohan eventually studies Ki and even writes about it. So I'm not pulling this concept out of thin air. This is something that he probably even would do here. This could help him a lot. Not only will it let him fight still, but it could help him work more towards being a scholar. Maybe he could even get Videl joining in too. Of course, the rest of the group is obviously involved. Goku, Piccolo, Vegeta, pretty much everyone continues life normally, just with 21 there now. And obviously she isn't training the entire time. I mean, she still does want to live as a human. She eventually ends up working at Capsule Corp actually. Bulma takes a liking to her and she is pretty smart. She's a great addition to the team in there. And it's great because not only is she helping out there, but she's able to do her own work there as well. And now let's go into a brief time skip, entering Battle of Gods. This is going to start relatively normally, but it's going to get very different as it continues onwards. At first, there's only two real big differences. At Bulma's party, obviously 21's going to be there, but also 17 does show up too. After finally meeting Goku and even seeing Vegeta and Gohan again, and with 21's involvement, people do drop by and check in on 17 more and more, which eventually even does lead to him reconnecting with 18 and even Krillin. Not a big deal now, but going forward, keep this in mind. Right away, 21's involvement is affecting Gohan and 17, and it'll affect more going forward. Beerus eventually awakens, heading to Earth looking for the Super Saiyan God. Much of his arrival is the same at first. 21 would be intrigued by seeing Beerus there, but Vegeta seems freaked out by him, so she doesn't really want to interact with Beerus much at first. And then we get to the pudding incident. Boo eats all of the pudding, and Beerus begins getting visibly upset. And right before he gets enraged, 21 interrupts. She looks around and then picks up a rock off the ground. Beerus has no clue what's going on. He's already pissed off enough and he doesn't have time for jokes. But she holds the rock in one hand and points a finger at it, launching a beam that then turns it into pudding. Beerus' jaw drops to the floor. She can make food from any object? This calms him down really quick. He gets to have his pudding, and also he has a newfound interest in 21. He doesn't even know her strength, but he's interested in the fact that she can turn anything into food. He asks her if she can make more, and she is a bit terrified, so she doesn't object. Vegeta watches on in complete disbelief as 21 becomes Beerus' personal chef for the next few minutes. Beerus ends up finding out that she's an android, even having some DNA from Frieza, the Saiyans, and Boo, as well as a few others. So that means she's part Saiyan. Does she have any knowledge of the Super Saiyan God? Well, actually no, she has looked extensively at Saiyan DNA, especially S cells, and trying to figure out what they do to that DNA. She doesn't have any idea of what a Super Saiyan God is. Of course she knows about Super Saiyan and the other forms beyond it. But if the Super Saiyan God thing does exist and it's not a person, well, she could probably find a transformation through experiments. Although she has no idea of how she'd go about that. She feels like she would have discovered that by now. There must be some ingredient missing. And Beerus actually does have an idea of what she could use. God Ki. They've never encountered any of that before. That's why they can't sense him. He has a proposition. If he can give her a little bit of God Ki just to study with, could she do some science nonsense and figure out how to make a Super Saiyan God real? Well, she has no promises, but she can at least try. And the great thing is Beerus isn't going to rush her here. He's already happy enough with all the food that she created. As long as there's a shot at this, he'll let her do whatever. He creates a sphere of Ki in his hands, telling her to be very careful with it. She has no idea of what it is and she can't even sense what's going on with it. It's pure godly energy. It's best to go to the lab right away. She flies over there, with Beerus and Whis following, as well as everyone else. Goku even teleports back to the party, surprised to see that half the people ditched. He has no clue what's going on or where Beerus took them to, but he teleports over and ends up at the Capsule Corp lab, figuring out what's going on. He finds this pretty strange. She's gonna figure out how to access a new form through science? Could she always have done this? Well, yeah, but she hasn't really been looking too much into it. Mostly it's just how to evolve Super Saiyan, and it has helped a bit. She's been working with Goku to try and fix Super Saiyan 3. But this will be completely different. She could run some tests, utilizing normal Ki, godly Ki, Saiyan DNA, all this different stuff that she has access to. And maybe she could figure out something, a way to affect Saiyan cells that makes them transform into some sort of Super Saiyan God. It takes a bit of time, but she's working quick and no one else knows what's going on, but they watch too. Beerus does get a bit bored, but just to make sure he doesn't get angry again, 21 creates some more food. And she's sure this will work. And eventually, she gets somewhere. Combining the God Ki with Saiyan cells in a certain way actually makes them react. and when they react, she can't even sense what's going on with them, but they're definitely a lot more resilient and stronger than before. Okay, now she needs to take this and apply it on a much larger scale, and maybe that could cause a transformation to happen. But she'll need some more godly ki, and she also needs a subject to test this out on. The way she's describing it makes it sound risky. I mean, it is an experiment after all. But Gohan volunteers. For the sake of the research, yeah, this actually sounds fun. And she's actually the perfect person to help with this. She not only has scientific knowledge on her side, but also magical abilities that could help her, thanks to her DNA from Boo. Beerus says if she's sure this will work, he'll lend some more godly ki. The amount he's lending is a pretty insignificant amount after all. Not even a fraction of his power. He places a hand on Gohan's back, and he's pretty terrified immediately. And he channels some godly ki into him. It makes Gohan feel strange and he can't really contain it. The power begins leaking out right away. But utilizing magic, 21 tries to contain it. And she tries to create that same reaction that she just had in her experiment. And something really strange happens. Gohan's eyes widen. He can sense the ki now. And as his eyes widen, they turn red. His hair follows suit. The entire lab begins shaking, but then everything becomes calm. 21 is elated, as is Beerus. It actually worked. Through this experiment, Gohan became a Super Saiyan God. And immediately, Beerus wants a fight. Oh yeah, Gohan forgot about that part before he volunteered, but he's still up for it. So he and Beerus head outside, and a battle commences between the two. But 21 realizes she doesn't just have to stop here, she could use this for everyone. And she looks over at Goku and Vegeta, and they have no idea what she's planning, but then she lifts a hand up. She still has some of that godly ki left from Beerus. Beerus is clashing with Gohan, amazed at how strong he's become with this new form. And he's really enjoying this fight, it's going pretty well. But Beerus senses a huge burst of energy from the ground below. There's no possible way. Using that remainder of ki, 21 performed the same experiment on Goku and Vegeta. They ascend upwards, now both having red hair just like Gohan. 3 Super Saiyan gods? This is way better than what Beerus already asked for. He just wanted to come here and find a Super Saiyan God. Now he has 3, and a person that can make him infinite food. This might be the greatest day of his life. And with 3 people fighting him at once, Beerus is allowed to have way more fun. He can show off a lot more power than he did before. The battle between him and Gohan was already pretty intense. But now Beerus is even less suppressed than before. And there's 2 extra people in the fight, both of whom are very strong in their own right. 3 Super Saiyan gods and a god of destruction. There is no need to explain how crazy that battle already is. 21 watches on too and begins thinking, she could probably use this for herself too. I mean, it would be a little bit tougher. It's one thing working with people that have so much Saiyan DNA in them, but it worked for Gohan, and Gohan's not a pure Saiyan. So if it works for him, it should be able to work for her too. Although it's going to take a lot more time to actually test this out, seeing how it interacts with her. Who knows how God Ki could affect the other parts of herself? Or maybe if they'd even block this from happening. Or worse, what if there's adverse effects from this? She wants to try right now, but it would be too risky to do that without studying it first. But hey, at least she can enjoy the fireworks, as well as everyone else. They watch on as the 3 Super Saiyan gods fight Beerus. Goku and Gohan are enjoying themselves a lot. It's always fun fighting together, and as for Vegeta, he's taking this very seriously. They are fighting Beerus after all, and he doesn't really want to screw around with him anymore. And even with all 3 of them together, it still seems like it's not enough for Beerus, although he has shown off a lot more power than he did originally. If he was only fighting one of them, it would have been an insignificant amount of his power that he was showing. But he admits, he did have to try a little bit. Very little though. And even though it doesn't really seem like a big compliment, he tells them it is a really big compliment. And he sees potential in all of them. This could be really good. He wants all 3 of these guys to come into his planet, as well as that android. She can unlock the same power too. And Beerus wants to learn that food magic that she has. Whis is a bit offended. He could just do it for Beerus too, but whatever makes him happy. Gohan appreciates the offer, but he needs to stay here on Earth. Although he promises Beerus, he's going to continue his training and become stronger than ever before. Thankfully, as a hybrid, he naturally will grow faster than anyone else. Beerus is a bit disappointed that he turned down the offer, but he'll trust the judgment. As for Goku, Vegeta, and 21, they all end up going. 21 is still a bit concerned about how this will affect her, but this will be nice for some training. And most importantly, she could study Beerus and Whis more. Who knows, maybe she can incorporate this data within herself. Imagine that, studying the power of a god of destruction and harnessing it for herself. Actually, wait, that might still be a bad idea for her. She still isn't sure about that evil side of her. Until she's completely sure it's gone, yeah, it might not be a great idea to actually do that. But still, going to Beerus' planet will be great regardless. But we'll be saving that for the next part. This is where we'll leave off for now. So, what did you guys think about this part? How do you think all the changes here will affect the story going forward? Leave any thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. I'll be sure to check them out to see what you guys think. As always, if you liked the video, be sure to drop a like. And let's try to hit that like goal from the beginning of the video so we can get another part of this series. If you haven't already, why not subscribe? As well as hitting the bell icon so you're notified about any future uploads on my channel, including more parts of the series. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.